I was 29 when they showed up at my door, acting like the past 6 years had never happened. My name's Jeremy, and yeah, I live in a penthouse now. Not the my uncle let me house sit his condo kind of penthouse. I'm talking floor-to-ceiling windows, rooftop access, private elevator, the whole deal. But I didn't win the lottery, and no, I'm not some crypto bro. I built my life from the ground up, alone. Which is important, because for over half a decade, my parents didn't speak a single word to me. No calls, no texts, not even a Christmas card. Nothing. So when I opened the door and saw them standing there, grinning like they were here to deliver a birthday cake, I thought maybe I was hallucinating. I wish I were. Instead, they pushed right past me like it was still 2009, and they were visiting my college dorm, and not the strangers they'd chosen to become. The kicker? The first thing out of my dad's mouth after 6 silent years was, "This place is nice. We deserve 50 grand for everything we did for you." And I wish I could say that was the most insane part of the day. Let me rewind, because for this to make any sense, you need to know how we got here. I didn't come from money. Not really. My parents were the type who liked to pretend we were better off than we were. Mom had this obsession with appearances, designer bags from shady online shops, leased SUVs we couldn't afford, insisting on hosting big family holiday dinners even if it meant maxing out credit cards. Dad played along, mostly because it was easier than fighting her. He worked a decent job at an insurance firm, but it was paycheck to paycheck most of the time. I was the only child, which sounds like a blessing in theory. In reality, it meant I was their sole investment. Their ticket. Every report card, every soccer match, every piano recital, I was the project. And when I started showing promise in school, especially in business and coding classes, the pressure tripled. They wanted me to be someone they could brag about, someone who'd make it, and buy them that beach house they always talked about. The problem was, I didn't want that life. Not for them. Not for me. I remember the first time I told them I didn't want to go to law school. I was 21. I'd just completed a summer internship with a startup and had this fire in my chest I couldn't ignore. I told them I wanted to try launching my own app. Nothing huge, just a side hustle I'd been working on. My mom acted like I told her I was joining a cult. My dad didn't say much, but I remember his jaw tightening, the way it always did when he wanted to yell but thought better of it. "We didn't raise you to be some dropout tech hippie," Mom snapped. "I didn't drop out," I said calmly. "I finished my degree. I just don't want to go to law school." Dad finally chimed in. "So what? You want to throw away your future for some app no one's going to use? You think you're smarter than the thousands of other kids trying to be the next Zuckerberg?" "No," I said. "I think I'm smart enough not to waste 3 years and 100 grand on a career I don't want." That was the start of the slow unraveling. They didn't cut me off immediately. No, it was more passive-aggressive than that. Less yelling, more silence. Less advice, more guilt-tripping. Every family dinner became a performance where they'd bring up how disappointing it is to watch talent go to waste. They'd remind me how they sacrificed everything for me, how Dad skipped his dream of opening a deli, how Mom put her career on hold to raise me, even though she hadn't worked since I was 5. I still tried to keep peace. I visited when I could. I sent birthday cards. But the distance grew. My business failed a few times before anything stuck. When I was 24, I had to move in with a friend because I couldn't afford rent. My parents didn't offer help, not even a couch to sleep on. They called it tough love. I called it abandonment. Then came the real breaking point. I was 25, working on what would eventually become the app that changed my life. I needed a small loan, nothing crazy, just enough to keep the servers running for a few months. I swallowed my pride and asked them for $3,000. They laughed. My mom said, "So now you come crawling back?" Dad shook his head and said, "This is the bed you made." I hung up the phone and didn't speak to them again. That was 6 years ago. In that time, I built my app, sold it for a 7-figure sum, and reinvested. It wasn't flashy. No viral story, no magazine cover. Just a lot of work, smart hires, and refusing to give up. Eventually, I co-founded a second company, this time in real estate tech. That one really took off. The penthouse came after we closed a major Series B round. It wasn't about showing off. It was about finally breathing. About waking up and seeing the skyline and knowing I built that view. Me. I never posted about it online. I wasn't one of those hashtag grind mode guys. My socials were clean. No flexing, no Lumbo selfies, just the occasional sunset pic or coffee shot. But I had cousins. And one of them, Danny, came to visit a few weeks ago. He's always been solid. We grew up close, even when our parents weren't. He snapped a photo of the living room, sunlight pouring through glass, minimalist decor, the balcony looking out over the city. He tagged me. I didn't even notice. Apparently, my mother did, because 3 days later, she and my father showed up at my door. And what happened next? Well, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. They acted like we'd never had a falling out. Like they hadn't ghosted me through the biggest years of my life. Like I owed them something. And when I didn't fall into line, they got weird. Fast. The entitled energy was unreal, like they'd been rehearsing it. I should have kicked them out then and there. But I didn't. I let them talk. And I listened. Big mistake. I let them talk. That was my first mistake. They strolled into my living room like it was theirs, like I'd bought the place with their money or something. My mom ran her fingers across the kitchen countertop, like she was inspecting a hotel suite, while my dad circled the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets, nodding like a real estate agent showing off a property. I mean, this is exactly the kind of place we always knew you'd end up in, Mom said, as if those 6 years of radio silence were just a vacation from parenting. It's clean, classy, good taste runs in the family. I just stood there, stunned. I hadn't seen them since I was 23. Now here they were, acting like we were close. Like we'd always been close. My stomach was tight, but I didn't say anything yet. I didn't want to explode. I wanted to understand. Why now? Why after all this time? We saw the photo Danny posted, Dad said, finally acknowledging the obvious. And I told your mother, we raised a smart one. I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, my eyes flicking between them. You didn't think to reach out before this? Mom didn't miss a beat. Well, we figured you needed space. 6 years of space? She looked mildly offended, like I was bringing up ancient history. You made your choices, Jeremy. We respected that. You mean the part where I asked for help and you laughed in my face? Her smile faltered, just slightly. We were trying to teach you responsibility. No, you were trying to punish me. Dad sighed like I was being dramatic. Come on. You're doing well now, aren't you? And that's what matters. You made it. And that's thanks to us. All those lessons, the discipline, the expectations, we set you on that path. I blinked. You think this, I motioned to the penthouse, is because of you? Of course it is, Mom said, like it was obvious. We invested everything into you. Time, money, energy. And look, it paid off. That's when I realized they hadn't come to reconnect. They came to collect. Dad sat down across from me and leaned forward. So listen, we're not here to make things awkward. We're just saying, it'd be fair if you gave back a little. A token of appreciation. For what? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. For raising you, he said, like it was a legally binding contract. 50,000. That's all we're asking. Not even 1% of what this place is worth, right? I stared at him. You want $50,000 because you raised me? Mom tilted her head. You owe us that much. After everything we sacrificed. I was quiet for a long time. I looked at their faces, trying to remember if they'd ever looked like parents to me. I remembered school nights spent alone at the kitchen table while they went out. I remembered the way they praised me in front of strangers, but criticized everything behind closed doors. I remembered how they hadn't even called when I was hospitalized for exhaustion during my startup days. And now they were asking for a payout. I'm not giving you anything, I said, my voice steady but low. That's when the mask dropped. Mom stood up sharply. Excuse me. I said no. You cut me out of your life when I needed you most. You mocked me. You made me feel worthless. And now you're here like nothing happened. You ungrateful little. She stopped herself. Dad's eyes narrowed. You think you got here without us? Who do you think paid for those private school tutors? Those AP classes? All those extracurriculars? You did that so you could brag to your friends, I snapped. Not for me. Not because you cared about what I wanted. I was your show dog. Silence fell. It was the first honest silence we'd had. But they weren't done. The next few weeks were a slow-motion car crash. It started with texts, long, emotional ones from my mother. At first, she tried guilt. We just want to be part of your life again. You're our only son. Can't we move past the past? Then it turned manipulative. We gave you everything, and this is how you treat us? Do you know what people would think if they knew how cold you've become? I didn't reply. Then came the extended family. Aunts and uncles I barely spoke to started reaching out. Hey, I heard your parents stopped by. How nice. Are you guys reconnecting? One cousin even sent me a video of my mom crying at a family gathering, saying she didn't recognize who I'd become. Apparently, they were painting a picture of me as the cold-hearted son who'd turned his back on his loving parents. It didn't stop there. One afternoon, I came home to find my doorman looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Levine, your parents were here again." "What?" "They said they were dropping off some old photos." They seemed upset. I went upstairs. There was a box outside my door, photos, yearbooks, childhood stuff. It felt like a guilt bomb. But what broke me was the last photo in the stack. It was me at age 7, holding a World's Best Son mug. On the back, in my dad's handwriting, "Don't forget where you came from." I didn't sleep that night. I started remembering things I'd buried. My mom asking me, at 12, why I couldn't be more naturally charming like the neighbor's kid. My dad refusing to come to my science fair because it wasn't a real sport. The time they took a family trip to Europe and left me behind because you've been acting entitled lately. And still, I had wanted their approval. That part hurt the most. Then came the betrayal that changed everything. It was a Saturday. I was out grabbing coffee with Danny. Yes, the cousin who posted that photo. He looked uncomfortable, stirring his drink. "Listen, man, I didn't know they'd find the post." "I'm sorry. It's not your fault," I said. "They've been waiting for a reason." He hesitated. "They've been telling people you invited them, that you begged them to visit and then humiliated them." My heart dropped. "What?" "They're saying you lured them here just to rub your wealth in their face." I felt sick. It didn't take long to confirm. My Aunt Lydia, my mom's older sister, texted me later that night. "I know they haven't been perfect, but was it really necessary to shame them like that in your penthouse?" Your mom was in tears for hours. The worst part? Some people believe them. Because in our family, reputation is everything. And my parents? They were master storytellers. They knew how to twist things just enough to sound plausible. The final straw came a week later. I was on a Zoom call with potential investors. Big meeting, high stakes, when a delivery arrived. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Over and over. When I finally ended the meeting and checked, I had over 20 missed calls and a voicemail from my dad. "You want to play this game? Fine. Don't forget we still have copies of your old tax forms. You want the world to see what kind of deals you were making back then? We can go public too." I froze. They were threatening me. Threatening to leak old, messy, irrelevant documents from my scrappy startup days just to what? Blackmail me? Embarrass me? It was petty. It was insane. And it told me one thing. They never saw me as a son. I was an investment. A product. And now, they wanted a return. I sat there, in the silence of my penthouse, the city glowing outside like a promise. My jaw clenched. Something inside me clicked. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. They played their hand. And I was done playing nice. I didn't respond to their threats. Not right away. I listened to the voicemail 4 times, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. But there it was, my father's voice, calm and deliberate, hinting at legal trouble over taxes he knew nothing about, because he hadn't been around when I was filing them. They weren't even shady documents, just messy, early startup chaos from when I was juggling freelance gigs and maxing out credit cards to keep a dream alive. Nothing illegal, nothing even remotely scandalous. But I knew what they were doing. They wanted control. Or more accurately, they wanted leverage. I deleted the voicemail, turned off my phone, and stared at the ceiling of my penthouse until 3 a.m. The next morning, I felt empty, like something had been ripped out of me overnight and replaced with static. I didn't shower. I didn't eat. I barely moved. The skyline outside looked less like a view and more like a wall, an expensive cage of my own making. The place felt too clean, too quiet. I designed it to be peaceful, but now it just reminded me how alone I really was. For the first time in years, I called in sick. My assistant sounded surprised. I never missed work. Not even during flu season. Not even when I was flying red-eyes back from conferences. But that morning, I sat in the dark with blackout curtains drawn, asking myself a question I hadn't asked since I was 23. What if they were right? What if I was ungrateful? What if my success was built on their sacrifices? What if I did owe them something? That spiral lasted 3 days. I ghosted meetings. I missed a friend's birthday dinner. I didn't even answer Danny's texts. I kept playing out different versions of my life in my head. What if I'd gone to law school? What if I'd given them the money the second they asked? What if I just played the role? The good son, the obedient prodigy. But then something happened that changed the shape of the spiral. On the fourth night, I was sorting through an old hard drive, mostly to distract myself. I stumbled across a video I hadn't seen in years. It was from college, a pitch competition, my first public demo of the app that would later become my first real company. I clicked play. There I was, 20 years old, awkward in an oversized blazer, stumbling through the slides, forgetting to click at the right time. I was a mess, but my voice was steady. My hands shook, but my words didn't. I talked about building something that mattered, something that made people's lives easier. I talked about growing up in a household where praise came with conditions and how technology could give people choices that no one gave me. I talked about freedom, and for the first time in days, I smiled. Because that kid wasn't built by guilt. He was built by defiance. He was built by the nights I sat in my room teaching myself JavaScript because no one thought it was worth their time to help me. By the rejection letters I turned into fuel. By every, "You're wasting your potential," that made me stay up until 4 a.m. fixing a bug. I wasn't built by my parents' sacrifices. I was built in spite of them. That night, I got up, took a shower, and scrubbed my face like I was trying to wash the doubt out of my pores. I looked in the mirror and said out loud, "You owe them nothing." That became my mantra. But I wasn't naive. I knew this wouldn't end unless I made it end. So I started rebuilding, not my company, but myself. Quietly. First, I reached out to Danny and apologized for going dark. He understood. He always did. He offered to talk to the rest of the family, to set the record straight, but I told him not yet. I needed to get my head right first. Then I called my lawyer. We combed through every potential threat my parents could pose. They had no real legal standing. The documents they threatened to leak were meaningless without context, and most of them were already public if anyone cared to dig. But I still had my legal team draft a cease and desist letter. Not aggressive, just enough to draw a line in the sand. Next, I made a list. Not of revenge plans, just goals. Real ones. Because I realized something in that spiral. I'd hit every benchmark I'd ever set, but not one of them had been mine. They were all based on proving something to someone else. Penthouse. Proof I wasn't a failure. Seven-figure deal. Proof I didn't need law school. Speaking gigs. Proof I mattered. None of them made me feel whole. So I started again. Goal 1. Mentor someone who reminded me of me. Goal 2. Spend one weekend a month completely offline. Goal 3. Reconnect with people who mattered. The first person I mentored was a high school junior named Theo. He DM'd me on LinkedIn asking about an old blog post I'd written on debugging serverless architecture. His message was thoughtful, nervous, and full of questions. I met him for coffee and saw my younger self in his eyes, except with less baggage and more curiosity. I didn't just give him advice. I gave him what I never had, unconditional support. Goal 2. Harder. My first weekend offline, I lasted 5 hours before I cheated and checked Slack. But by the third month, I was hiking in Vermont with nothing but a paperback and a thermos. I came back sunburnt and sore, but lighter, like something had been unplugged in the best way. Goal 3 took time. I invited old friends over for dinner. People I'd neglected while chasing metrics and milestones. We laughed. We told stories. We didn't talk about money once. I remembered what it felt like to be seen, not just admired. But while I was rebuilding, my parents weren't sitting still. They ramped up the guilt campaign. More relatives reached out. A few distant cousins posted cryptic Facebook statuses like, "Funny how money changes people," or "Some people forget who raised them." One even tagged me in a post of an old family Christmas photo with the caption, "Miss when things were real." I ignored it all, until I couldn't. It was a Sunday morning. I was making pancakes and listening to jazz when the building concierge called. "Mr. Levine, your parents are downstairs again." I closed my eyes and exhaled. "Do they have a delivery?" "No, sir. They're asking to come up." "I've told you before." "I know. But this time, they brought someone with them." My chest tightened. "Who?" "A lawyer." I froze. "They're saying they have a right to speak with you. Something about family obligations." I hung up. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just entitled behavior anymore. This was war. But I wasn't the same Jeremy they'd steamrolled years ago. I wasn't scared. I was ready. I didn't go down to meet them. I watched from the security feed as they argued with the front desk staff. My mother in one of her old faux designer coats. My father standing stiff beside her, arms crossed, and next to them, A man in a wrinkled charcoal gray suit, holding a manila folder under one arm, like it contained the Holy Grail. I studied the scene for a moment, emotionless. Then I turned off the feed and went back to my pancakes. Cold by now, but I forced myself to eat. My hands didn't shake. My mind didn't race. I'd spent enough years letting them decide how I felt. They didn't get that power anymore. An hour later, I received the email. The lawyer's name was Nathaniel Brewster, a name almost too ridiculous to take seriously. He represented my parents in what he called a formal family restitution claim. Apparently, they were prepared to make the case that I owed them financial support based on verbal agreements made during upbringing and investment in the defendant's future earnings. He even attached a 3-page letter detailing their contributions, including a $2,100 bill for orthodontic care from 2007 and receipts from piano lessons I hated. They were actually itemizing their parenting. I read every word. Twice. Then I flagged it, saved it, and forwarded it to my lawyer. I'd already laid the foundation during my spiral. That quiet legal prep wasn't just about pushing back. It was about preparing for this. Because some part of me had known they wouldn't stop until they tried to drag me down. And now, it was time to flip the script. I wasn't interested in going nuclear. Not yet. No lawsuits, no media exposés, no screaming matches in court. I wanted something worse. I wanted them to feel insignificant. But to do that, I needed more than just silence. I needed witnesses. Step 1 was locking down my narrative. I started documenting everything, every text, every email, every voicemail I could retrieve. My assistant helped me catalog them into folders labeled by year and subject. Emotional manipulation, financial threats, public smear attempts, and the ever-growing cousin drama file. I wanted a complete timeline. A cold, objective record of what had really happened, one that didn't rely on my word alone. Then I called Danny. "I'm going to ask you a favor," I said, pacing my balcony as the sun dipped below the skyline. "You know I've got your back. I need you to talk to the family. Set the record straight. And I need you to record it." There was a pause. "You serious?" "They're already lying about what happened," I said. "They're playing the victim. I don't want to expose them publicly, but I do want it on record that they've poisoned the well." Danny agreed. Reluctantly. He knew it might get messy. But he was loyal, and more importantly, he'd seen the truth with his own eyes. A week later, he met with my aunt and a few cousins over lunch and casually brought up my parents' visit. "I heard Jeremy invited them," Aunt Lydia said, sipping her wine. Danny pressed her. "You sure about that?" She blinked. "Well, that's what they said." He let the silence hang. Then he leaned in and said, "They lied. I was there the whole time. He didn't invite anyone. They showed up, unannounced, and demanded money. 50,000, to be exact." Another silence. Then they tried to guilt him. Now they're threatening him. They even brought a lawyer to his building. "Wait, what?" one of the cousins said. Danny recorded it all, discreetly. The shock. The awkward shifting of blame. The slow unraveling of the image my parents had so carefully curated. It wasn't just about telling the truth. It was about removing their cover. The less plausible their story became, the fewer places they had to hide. Step 2 was reshaping my image on my terms. I reached out to a few journalists I trusted, ones I'd spoken to in the past about entrepreneurship and tech ethics. We scheduled a podcast interview. It wasn't about my parents, not directly. I framed it around the cost of toxic expectations, how young entrepreneurs often come from families that see them as investments, not people. I told my story in abstract terms. How success doesn't erase trauma. How validation-seeking can turn into a prison. How emotional blackmail often comes dressed as family tradition. The episode went viral. The inbox flooded, not just with strangers, but friends, founders, former coworkers, people who said, this was my story. And in that wave of responses, I found unexpected allies. One of them was Marissa, a venture capitalist who had passed on my startup back in the day, but always respected my grit. She reached out with a simple message. That interview hit home. If there's ever anything I can do, say the word. So I did. Step 3, create a shield. Marissa connected me with a PR advisor, someone who specialized in quiet reputation management. We developed a strategy, not to attack, but to protect. We quietly released an FAQ-style blog post on my website clarifying false narratives that had been circulating. No names, no accusations, just facts. I had not invited estranged family to visit me. I had not made any financial commitments to them. I had not disowned my family, but I had set boundaries to protect my mental health. The tone was measured, mature, calm, and it killed my parents' leverage. Because now, any move they made looked desperate. And still, I wasn't done. The lawyer they sent, Mr. Brewster, sent a follow-up letter threatening formal action if I didn't respond. My legal team replied with a 3-word statement: cease and desist. But I added something extra. A document, clean, professional, notarized. A formal statement revoking any implied financial obligation or support. I included receipts of the times they refused to help me when I needed it. I included testimony from friends who housed me, fed me, supported me during those years of silence. I included a notarized affidavit from my doctor, confirming the stress-induced hospitalization I suffered while building my company, an event my parents ignored entirely. I made it clear, any attempt to pursue me further would result in public disclosure of this evidence. And then, just for good measure, I sent a personal letter to their lawyer. Mr. Brewster, I understand you're representing my parents in what appears to be an emotionally charged and factually inaccurate matter. Please be advised, I have no intention of engaging in further contact unless legally necessary. Should your clients continue to fabricate claims, misrepresent past events, or attempt to damage my reputation through social or legal channels, I am prepared to pursue counteraction. I do not take pleasure in this, but I take my peace seriously. Sincerely, Jeremy Levine. I mailed it. Certified. 2 days later, the call stopped. No more voicemails. No more uninvited visits. No more guilt bombs. But silence wasn't enough. I wanted closure. And for that, I needed the final piece. Something only they could give me. So I did something bold. I called my mother. The phone rang 3 times. Then she answered. There was a pause, just breathing, no words. Maybe she didn't recognize the number. Maybe she did and froze. Either way, I wasn't going to let her start. Hi, Mom, I said calmly. More silence. Then, her voice, tight, sugar-laced, strained. Jeremy, I wasn't expecting. I know, I interrupted. That's kind of the point. A beat. Then, is this about the lawyer? It's about a lot of things, I said. But we'll start there. You sent someone to my home, threatened me with made-up debts, tried to turn the family against me, and fabricated a story where you're the victim. That's not fair. No, I said firmly. What's not fair is how I was treated for years. What's not fair is having parents who only show up when they smell money. What's not fair is being made to feel like a product with a return on investment. She exhaled sharply. You have no idea how much we did for you. You're right, I said. I didn't. Because you never let me forget it long enough to appreciate anything. Every meal, every ride, every recital, you hung over my head like a receipt waiting to be cashed in. She went quiet again. I waited. Then she said, so what now? Are you calling to lecture us? Or are you trying to fix this? I almost laughed. Fix this, like I'd broken something. No, I said. I'm calling to offer you one last chance to stop this before it gets worse. Worse. Her voice sharpened. Is that a threat? It's a promise, I replied. If you drop this, no more lawyers, no more manipulation, no more backroom storytelling. I'll let it go. We'll stay out of each other's lives. Clean break. And if we don't, then I'll go public. The words landed hard. She didn't speak. You want to keep pushing this fantasy that you're the long-suffering parents of an ungrateful millionaire? Fine. But I have everything. The texts, the voicemails, the family statements. I even have legal documentation of the time you denied me housing and support while I was hospitalized. You wouldn't. I would, I said, steady as stone. And I won't just go to the media. I'll go to the platforms you care about most, your church, your retirement groups, your bridge club. I'll make sure everyone who's heard your sob story gets the truth. This would ruin us. You've already ruined what we had, I said. I'm just deciding whether I bury it or frame it. There was a long, shaking pause. Then she said it. The one thing I never thought I'd hear. What do you want from us? I closed my eyes. Finally, I want you to drop everything. I want you to tell your lawyer this case is dead. I want you to call Aunt Lydia and the cousins and set the record straight, all the way. I want you to admit what you did. And I want you to never, ever contact me again. Jeremy, if you do all that, I won't press charges. And I won't burn what's left of your reputation. She didn't argue. Not this time. Just silence. Then she hung up. And just like that, It was over. I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no victory lap around the penthouse. I just stood there in the stillness of my kitchen, staring at the wall where the city met the clouds. For the first time in years, my chest felt loose. Not full, not proud, just unburdened. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I checked with my legal team. No follow-up from Brewster. The restitution claim was formally withdrawn. Then came the email. A group message sent to the entire extended family. From my mother's account. Short, blunt, cold. To clarify recent confusion, Jeremy did not invite us to his home. Our actions were unannounced and inappropriate. There was a misunderstanding, and we deeply regret any stress caused. We apologize for misrepresenting the situation. We ask that you give Jeremy the space he deserves. No warmth, no ownership, but it was public, and that was enough. A week later, I saw Aunt Lydia at a fundraiser. She looked at me across the room with a mix of guilt and curiosity. We didn't speak. She didn't have to. The damage was done. The family dynamic had shifted. The golden image of my parents had cracked, and through that crack, light was finally pouring in. I focused on the things that mattered again. My company. My friends, the young developers I was mentoring. I started writing again, nothing public, just small essays on healing and boundaries and what it means to grow up when your parents never do. One of them ended up getting passed around online. I didn't attach my name. I didn't need to. And as for my parents, I never heard from them again. But I did hear about them. They sold their house, moved to a smaller town. My mother started going to a new church. My father plays cards with a group of old insurance buddies. They're quieter now, less visible. Occasionally, someone will say, "Your mom mentioned you last week. Sounded like she misses you." I just nod, because I'm not angry anymore. I'm not sad, either. I'm free. And sometimes, when I stand on my balcony at night, staring out at the city I build a life in, I think back to the version of me who wanted their approval more than air. Then I remind myself, I was never their investment. I was my own, and I finally paid myself back in full.